Hi, I'm Alicia Wanless. You might be wondering why I'm struggling with the bonnet. Mind your own business, and I might tell you.
Partial funding for this program was provided by HistoryMoments.com, the most viewed history video site in the world.
It's all part of cultural and heritage tourism, a concept we here in Eastern Ontario might not be exploring quite enough. Cultural and heritage tourism is all about traveling to places to experience the events and lives of the past, sort of like what we're doing here today in lovely Fort Wellington in Prescott, Ontario.
With our industries not what they used to be, I think tourism and people, families particularly, want to know their heritage, want to know where they came from, and I think bringing that alive to young children especially is paramount to building and tourism in this area.
Well, I think that if you look at this area, this region tells the story of early Canada. And so in people trying to reconnect to the stories that Spencerville Mill's story may not be their specific family story, but it is representative of the stories that their families would have had. And I think people are looking for that connection to the past and where they came from, so maybe to serve as somewhat of a guidepost of where they're going. So we're excited to be part of that story.
How many of us as business people actually support heritage festivals and historic holdings to encourage more people to visit our region?
heritageholidays.ca is a tourism-based website that provides information with a focus on certain themes of travel. Rather than all the accommodations being grouped together and the attractions being grouped together, it's instead being grouped together in a heritage theme. For example, if your interests are mills, it will route you from the Watson's Mill up in Manotick down to the lovely Spencerville Mill here in Spencerville, and give you ideas along the way where you could eat and sleep if you were taking a long weekend of it, approximate costs that would be incurred for you and your family, and parking, and other things of interest within that theme.
Well, I named my store the Loyalist Rose, honoring the Cameron family who brought the Loyalist Rose from Scotland to the States, and during the Revolution they brought the Loyalist Rose to Canada, where it's growing all over Alexandria.
It often seems, however, that the promotion of heritage tourism is left to the organizations that own and run historic holdings. All of us love the potential for tourism dollars, but few of us see it as our responsibility to actively promote heritage tourism. But with little organization and cooperation, we in Eastern Ontario have much potential to develop considerable cultural and heritage tourism.
We've introduced a new event called the Heritage Fair, and this year 2011 ran early June. We were celebrating the early Victorian period, and we're quite fortunate that we had a number of reenactors and characters. We had Sir John A. Macdonald come for tea on the second day. And it was very well received by the community. I think they enjoyed it very much. It was an opportunity for them to celebrate some of their own stories.
Well, whenever they have an event like you had the Heritage Fair in the spring, the business all got on side. They all helped promote it. They all had specials on that weekend and made people feel welcome and provided help with the fair whenever it was held. They all took part in it and helped support it.
Nothing in Eastern Ontario prevents us from capitalizing on heritage tourism. Our region is home to many sites related to the War of 1812.
Yes, I'm very excited to be coordinating the regional signature event. The province has identified signature events coming through the bicentennial in a number of years, and the Flight of the Royal George event, which is being held from Bath to Kingston over 2.5 days on the July 1st weekend of 2012. And it's going to be very exciting. We're going to have approximately 8 tall ships. Approximately 1,000 reenactors will be involved, and we're expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of 60,000 visitors from a tourism perspective into the region.
In addition to Bath, Eastern Ontario is home to many sites related to the War of 1812, including Brockville, which was a garrison town and renamed after that reluctant hero who died during the war, At Chrysler's farm, a pivotal battle was waged, which arguably defended Montreal and enabled Canadians to maintain sovereignty. Prescott's own Glengarry Light Infantry crossed the frozen St. Lawrence River in February 1813 to take the fort in Ogdensburg, and even Perth was established as a military town and a second line of defense should the first be breached. All of this is to say nothing of the many settlements that were established by 1812 war veterans or the other historic footprints left on the wider area. The question really is, what are we waiting for?
For the War of 1812 bicentennial, Fort Wellington is planning to have a troop, approximately 20 soldiers that will travel around eastern Ontario to different events that took place over the course of the War of 1812.
We're hoping to build on what we accomplished here in Prescott last year for our Prescott bicentennial, 200 years from 1810 to 2010. So throughout the year, we had over 7,500 people here. So we're hoping throughout the 2010, 2011, 2012, and all the way up to 2014 that we will get up to 10,000 people coming through, not just Prescott, but the South Grenville area. I know during our bicentennial, businesses were very eager to become involved. Sponsorship was very welcome, and I think between Doors Open and the bicentennial and several activities throughout 2012, there's a tremendous opportunity there, so we welcome that.
There's school teachers, there are professional soldiers, there are former soldiers, there are police officers, and there are people that just come together with their common love of history.
Well, Parks Canada is working with many partners right now, but there are many opportunities for businesses to become involved with their community organizations.
We've been leveraging heritage tourism to actually create some new partnerships with some of the existing heritage operators in the area, as well as looking to find ways to provide new programming for the mill.
Well, we have, of course, the War of 1812 Bicentennial Alliance. We've been meeting now for 3 years, and there are active scheduled events there. There's the Grenville County Historical Society. Of course, there's the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Business Association, and of course the Town of Prescott. I think there's several avenues, and most of those have websites. And as the War of 1812 comes forward, there'll be a lot more notice and activities out there for people to really become involved.
There are a number of signature events that are planned for the Bicentennial Alliance. Parks Canada is partnering with a number of different groups, the Province of Ontario, the St. Lawrence Bicentennial Committee, Town of Prescott. So Parks Canada will be trying to do as much visitor experience as they can.
Eastern Ontario isn't just home to lovely heritage architecture. Such buildings also attract historians and antiquarian buffs who are a wealth of knowledge and expertise when trying to bring history to life.
The war changed everything in the region. When it started, people realized that almost the majority of the population of Ontario were American born. So obviously there were implications for what would happen in a war between the two sides. So when the war ended, it was decided that Americans would not be allowed to buy land in Upper Canada anymore, and that led to a huge increase in population from other sources, planned increases, so that there were, for example, a lot of ex-soldiers discharged from various regiments who had fought in the war, some of whom had been brought in here for the war and decided not to go home again. And they got free land, so most people would get maybe 100 acres, officers got 200 acres free. And the plan was to settle them along the line of what was to become the Rideau Canal. Because the other big thing, and probably the biggest thing that people would know about that came out of the war, was a realization that they needed the Rideau Canal. They needed to have a way of getting military equipment and personnel along the St. Lawrence corridor without going along the river, because it was too open to attack and to interdiction. So the plan was from the 1815 period on to build what became the Rideau Canal. And in order to protect the canal itself, it was decided that these discharged soldiers would be given land along the line of the canal, so that if there were any future wars, they'd be there to protect it.
You might try to incorporate history into your business, maybe by having your employees dress up in costume. Or perhaps the building where you're situated has a long heritage that can be brought to life, much like they've done at the Red George Public House.
Well, when we decided to do the pub restaurant, we certainly needed a catchy name and so on, and a little bit of investigation, we realized that George MacDonnell was certainly the hero of Prescott during the War of 1812, back in the days when pubs or public houses were the big thing, and it became a natural for us to name it after Red George MacDonnell.
The troop that we're going to use is a part of the Glengarry Light Infantry. They were pretty much raised in this part of the country and took part in most of the major battles that happened throughout the War of 1812, and were part of the troop that attacked Ogdensburg February 22nd, 1813, led by Red George MacDonnell.
I don't really like to say beat them up, but he took over the fort and brought back some souvenirs and burnt the fort. But Fort Wellington, which is our mainstay, wasn't built until a year later. So I've done some calculating and stuff, and I figured that he was camped out along with his troops right in this exact location.
People looking for a vacation have rest and relaxation on the mind. For some, that might mean beaches. For others, adventure. The point is, make it easy. Whether you run a restaurant, an event planning business, or a hotel, try attracting people to the region.
They come to town, they go to our harbor, they go to our museum, they love the town, and they become embraced in our Shakespeare Festival. And all these elements combine together to really make culture and heritage tourism the way of the future for our small towns, especially Prescott.
The International Plowing Match was a huge success for business and brought people in that got to know the area. We heard comments that a lot were coming back. They'd never been to the area. They couldn't believe it was this nice down here in Rideau Lakes. But the International Plowing Match was a great benefit to United Counties of Leeds Grenville.
Thinking differently almost always pays, so why not consider what would have been unthinkable in 1812 and try and gauge the Americans? Who knows? The phrase, "The Americans are coming, the Americans are coming," just might be music to everyone's ears. Great, thank you, David. Continue making King and Country proud.
Huzzah.
Partial funding for this series was provided by and by